Welcome to our May virtual user group. I'm your host, Shay Bagwell, and with me today I have Porter Thorndike, Aiden Ellesmere, and Hannah Knox. And we are going to be talking to you guys about some data science, some machine learning, some AI, and WebFOCUS. So the presenters have a lot of really cool material to share with you guys today, and I know that you are excited to jump into it. A couple of quick housekeeping, just as a reminder, this session is being recorded. So following the event, you will receive a copy of the recording as well as any materials that the presenters are able to share with you guys. I will make sure that that is also included in your follow-up email. If you have any questions for our presenters today, please utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We will be monitoring the Q&A during the course of the webinar, and then of course we will have time at the end for some additional Q&A. So don't be shy, bring your questions. Our presenters are ready to answer those. So with that, I do have a couple of things to share with you guys. As usual, some customer resources that are available that we just want to keep at the forefront of your mind. Let me share my screen here. All right. So let's dive into what those are. The new IBI.com. If you guys still have not been out to our new website, I highly encourage you to venture out there, take a look around. We've done a couple of updates. We've added some new things. There's new data sheets out there, some blogs. We've got the education platform now linked out there. You guys can access events, product news. You can also access the IBI support from our website. So if you have not been utilizing our website, be sure to put that as a note that all things IBI can be found at your fingertips. As I just mentioned, you can access our support portal out there through the IBI website or at support.ibi.com. Using our support portal is where you will submit any of your technical tickets that you have. You also can get product downloads, access to the documentation out there. Any new product notifications will be posted out there, and just some additional useful links that might be of use to you. So be sure to remember about the support portal if you need any help. And then also our e-delivery where you are able to download the new products. So be sure to navigate out there to the e-delivery. I know it still has the TIPCO address. I believe we are working to get that updated. But please remember that you can navigate out to e-delivery for the product downloads. All of our events are posted under the events section, so you can register for all the upcoming webinars. Those include all of the Focus Fridays, the virtual user groups, and you also can view those on demand. So if you miss one of them, we do post the recordings out there on demand, so you can go back and find any of the topics of interest to you over the past couple of years and watch those recordings. All right, Summit, IBI's Golden Summit is coming up on October 14th in New York. Registration is open and we are putting the final details on our agenda, just making a few final tweaks. I think you guys are going to be very pleased with this agenda. We've got a couple of surprises that we are throwing in the mix for this special occasion. And we are super excited about it. This is 50 years of innovation with IBI, and so we hope that you guys can join us. We are looking forward to seeing everyone there. There's already a lot of folks registered, so I do want to push it out again. If you have any interest in attending, please be sure to register and grab that seat. The IBI community. If you have not joined our community, I highly encourage you to go out and sign up for a profile and account out there. Of course, it's complimentary, but a very useful tool for you and your team members to use a community. You can find articles out there written by our IBI experts. There are threads of conversations going on between you and your peers, questions being asked. And a lot of you have been asking about focal point, and we are migrating the focal point material to the community. So I believe that is in the final stages of getting all of that into the community. I've been keeping you guys updated with some notifications in community and will continue to do so. I will get an update here shortly. I will ask our team where we are with that and to see if those articles are ready to be viewed. But just letting you guys know that focal point material is being migrated to the community, so you will be able to access it there. So another reason, if you're not in community, to join community if you want to see the focal point material. Education update. If you guys did not hear already, our new education platform, our education center is now live. So you guys have access to IBI training. Last week, we did a webinar on how to access the platform and what to expect once you're in it. Dave did a great job with walking through how to register, how to gain access, all the steps you go through, and then did a live demo of the platform. If by any chance you missed that webinar and you are curious about what that process looks like, you can find it on the IBI website. You can also find it on our YouTube channel. Or if you just want to ping me, I'll send it over. So a lot of options there to get your hands on the recording if you missed it, but we are excited about the training platform. A lot of great courses out there available right now for you. And we will be adding new courses every quarter, so constantly improving and adding new stuff. And then, of course, if there's a course or material that is not out there that you are interested in having, please let us know, and we will work with our team to get some content created for that. So be sure to check out the new education platform if you haven't. And then social media, all the rave always. If you are a social media user and are on any of the three following, linked, X, or YouTube, we'd love for you to give us a follow. Keep up with all of our IBI news that we post out there. And then, of course, as I mentioned on the YouTube channel, you can access the recordings. And then last but not least for me, if you are not getting any of our emails, we do a monthly newsletter. We have the invites that go out for all of the events and the webinars. If you are not receiving those to your inbox, please let me know. I will check to see if you are on our mailing list. And if you're not on our mailing list, add you if you'd like to be. But also if they're going to your spam or junk, let's fix that and make sure that they are hitting your inbox so you are in the know of all things IBI. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Hannah real quick. She is going to talk to you guys quickly about the upgrade program.
Yes, thank you so much, Shay. Do you mind going on to the next slide?
Yeah.
And then one more. Guys, this is your reminder that if you haven't already moved to the latest version of WebFOCUS, it is time to begin planning your upgrade. We were really excited to announce a few months back the WebFOCUS upgrade program. We've had a number of you all participate, and we're definitely seeing excitement around it. And for those of you who are still on a version of WebFOCUS that is set to retire in either September or December of this year, please go ahead, head to ibi.com and get registered for this program. We are working alongside you all with new tools and a new self-assessment to help you gauge the complexity of your upgrade and then get you plugged in with a complimentary workshop with one of our partners to really dive into what's needed for you and your organization specifically. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we want to get you plugged into the latest version of WebFOCUS well in advance of the upcoming retirement of 8.207.28 and 9.0 at the end of this year. So again, 8.207.28.14, that whole series of releases retires this September, and then we're looking at a retirement of WebFOCUS 9 at the end of this year. So if you're on a version before one of those, then definitely get plugged into the program. We have tools for you too. And we're excited to meet with you and get you started on your upgrade journey. So I'm going to drop this link in the chat so that you guys have this. And as a reminder, everything you're going to see today with Porter and with Aiden, that is on the latest version of WebFOCUS. So if you want to take advantage of these features that you see today, which I'm sure all of you want to, you need to go ahead and get plugged into that version. So I'm going to drop that link now, and you guys can go ahead and head on over to our website, to the upgrade program landing page, and get registered. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Okay, guys, let's dive in. I'm going to turn it over to Porter and we will get started on what you guys came here for today. Porter.
Thank you, Shay. All right, here we go. Great to be with everyone. I mean, by the way, did you see how relaxed that guy in the upgrade program looked that had clearly just completed his upgrade? He's leaning back in his chair, not a care in the world. That could be you. Another great reason to upgrade is to take, the data science and machine learning capabilities, they are evolving rapidly, and really to take advantage of all those capabilities, the latest and greatest features, you kind of need to be on a modern release. Another great reason to upgrade as well. I don't know about you, but I'm the type of guy where if I'm not on the current release, I'm like, start having a panic attack. I'm not going to lie. This demo was built on 9.3.3. I'm pretty sure 9.3.4 is available. I'm like, oh my God, but I can't risk the demo. I can't do an upgrade right before I do the demo. But like the second this demo ends, I will assure you I'll be upgrading. There's some cool new features in 9.3.4 in regards to data science and machine learning as well. So it's great to be with you. This is a really cool and interesting topic. We've invested a lot of resources around product management, research and development, and engineering to these capabilities. We've gotten great feedback over the last couple of years as we introduce these capabilities in things like virtual user groups and in-person user groups and summits. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to try to put these capabilities in context for a web-focused customer. How does this benefit a web-focused customer, whether we're talking about natural language query or machine learning functions or instant insights? And so what I did is I built a demo that I think will contextualize how some of these capabilities can benefit you. A lot of times when we show natural language query, it's kind of standalone, and I think a lot of people maybe don't understand how this could benefit them based on how they're using WebFocus today. And same with machine learning functions, showing this cool kind of demo in data flow mode. We're using algorithms. It's great, but I built a demo that I think will help contextualize how some of these capabilities will benefit a WebFocus customer. The capabilities that we've got, and there's three big ones: natural language query, machine learning functions, and instant insights. To me, they are not replacing anything that you're using today. They're going to complement it and they're going to augment your experience. What are we looking at? We're looking at a portal that I built with a series of reports and dashboards and parameters. And this is probably the type of experience that a lot of web-focused customers use today. Okay, so whether it's embedded or whether you're using our portal, whether it's a list of standard reports or dashboards or receiving information via Reportcaster, most of our customers are what I would call non-technical consumers that are consuming applications like this. And so this might be something that someone at a bank could consume. And what we're looking at is all of the bank's customers. We see them listed right here, a lot of different dimensions and measures, and then some visuals. And these visuals are taking advantage of a predictive measure that we're going to build as part of the demonstration. And this is a pretty common use case for those in banking or really any organization, which is customer churn. Okay, so of course you're looking to identify customers that are at risk that may leave for whatever reason. And so one of the benefits that WebFocus can offer for things like churn probability is that, we are in people's lives in regards to large audiences of people consuming our reports and dashboards. And so if you can add something to that existing report or dashboard that is like probability of churn, then it adds value to that application. Okay. And so, we might be looking at customers and we might be looking at they got different types of cards, they've got different education levels, income categories, marital statuses, and more, things like credit limits and credit scores. All of this information that would be very useful in helping identify kind of the profile of that customer that's at risk. So if I'm looking at this, I would notice, all right, the customers with the blue card seem to be the highest probability of risk, right? And so like what a lot of web-focused customers might do, whether you're using a predictive measure or not, they're looking at the information, they might be drilling down, they might be filtering. I noticed that those with advanced degrees have kind of like the next highest probability. we can kind of just zero in a little bit, kind of identify this at-risk cohort. And at this point, we might say, all right, you know what? I've trimmed this down enough. Show me the list of customers that are kind of like high value, meaning they've got, a large balance or they've got a lot invested, but that are also at risk. So I could look at my report now and I could sort by balance and just kind of, I could look at this probability. Okay, that's 27%. That's not good. Oh, 79%, 68%. We might have conditional formatting. Like Charles Tesh would be someone I'd be worried about, right? Like a lot invested in the bank, very high probability of churn. So that's just a kind of a simple walkthrough of like looking at a dashboard, a couple filters. Then we might drill down. That drill down might take us to another page within the portal that gives me additional information on this customer. Like I think that's kind of a common experience for a lot of WebFOCUS customers doing that. So as we do this and as we go about our kind of our lives within the WebFOCUS application, we learn things and questions arise. Okay, so like I notice, blue card categories, advanced degrees, this specific investor, we're kind of like learning things. It may be additional questions are popping up or arising. How do I get the answers to those questions? I might continue on my journey within my WebFOCUS portal. And what this is this is a dashboard that's automatically generated through Instant Insights. Aiden will be showing you a live demo of this later. Would this show up? We think these types of insights will start showing up within the workflow of existing WebFOCUS consumers. This tells you some cool things. The dark green boxes are where the highest concentration of our customers are. So you can see those that have left, most of them had the blue card. We saw that earlier, didn't we? Those in a specific income category, well, most of those that have churned were low. Most of those that are okay seem to have a high income category. How about marital status? So most of the people that have left are single, and then we see most people have stayed kind of divorced or married. And we see right there. We also run some tests here that tell us which variables or measures are most statistically significant. So we see that average balance is a really statistically significant variable at predicting those that have left. Average revolving balance is another one. So these are all just ways to better inform the WebFOCUS user and really augment and complement their existing experience. And then the time series anomaly chart shows us different periods where kind of the average predicted risk spiked either high or low. These are all things we might want to follow up on or look into. How would I do that? Do I use the WebFOCUS Designer? That's not practical for everyone, for the thousands and hundreds of thousands of WebFOCUS consumers. So I think you can see where I'm getting at. Natural language query really is going to be a great solution for people that get answers to those questions. You might have additional content built out based on that predictive measure. This is one that I like a lot. This is looking at it geospatially. So if you want to understand where are there concentrations of our customers in certain locations that are more at risk. So this is a binned heat map because there could be hundreds of dots. They might overlap each other. This is a nice visualization technique to kind of show you where the concentration of these people live. You might even have people using WebFOCUS Designer for what I would call a self-service analytics use case, where they're visualizing the data rapidly, they're building out a dashboard, and then this leverages something called brush linking, where the dashboard itself, we can kind of like start making selections on the dashboard itself that broadcasts that selection elsewhere. So I think as you can see, is we embark on training and deploying a model to understand the profile of at-risk customers, all of the different places that could show up within the existing WebFOCUS application, across self-service, operational reporting, dashboarding, types of use cases, and more. And so, excuse me, where that leads us is, wow, I've learned a lot. I have a lot of additional questions. How can I get the answers to those questions without calling someone, needing WebFOCUS Designer? We think natural language query is a great way to do that. And what's cool is you can just embed a natural language query widget within your existing portal. And I think that's really the best way to do it. A lot of times we've shown this from the WebFOCUS Hub via what's called the Explore Data widget. I love the concept of just adding an Ask a Question page. to your existing WebFOCUS portal, and you'll kind of see this can be, multiple sources of data potentially. There's going to be things like drop down, autocomplete, type ahead to help you answer that question. Before we go through a demo, let me show you some additional information on the natural language query capability. So 9.3.4 is the current production release. This demo is based on 9.3.3. I'll indicate what's been added in 9.3.4. About a year ago, we embarked on a journey to improve the back-end large language model as part of natural language query. And, everyone really is focused in on the front end of a natural language query experience, rightfully so. How easy is it to use? Is it producing the appropriate answer in the most appropriate visual format? What interactivity options do I have? Is it accurate? Can I just speak language, English language, the way I would talk to another person? And then the reality is, though, that back-end model is so important in terms of understanding your question, what could be a very kind of like English language like question that you would ask to another person or talk to another person. And how does it take what is seemingly a simple question, but it actually contains a lot of complex information, and then map that to complex data structures to return the optimal, accurate answer? So these are all the models. These are all the big boys, all the models that we evaluated when we were looking at improving the back-end model. And the one that we settled on was the Microsoft 5.3 model. So this is for a number of reasons. The first is it's huge, 3.8 billion parameters. It's open source, so of course we can use it. It's also a good match for a lot of use cases that we think will be important to WebFOCUS customers. Sentiment analysis, summarization, Q&A, and text generation are some of the top ones. Some of the biggest reasons we did it are around performance and accuracy. So this model is a lot faster at kind of taking your question, navigating complex data structures, and returning that answer quickly. That's super important for a good user experience. It's also very accurate, that we saw a huge increase in accuracy of the requests from our previous model to this one. The other thing is date and time handling is actually pretty complex. And so we've had pretty strong date and time handling. The user can request, ask for date ranges this year, last year. As of 9.3.4, they could actually ask for things like, show me the sales for the last 9 Decembers. So really smart about how it handles dates and times. Things like handling spacing, null values, dirty data, can scale very high, large volumes of data, large volumes of requests, and understands your request as well, and is continuously learning, continuously being improved as well. So as I go through, I'm going to take you through this demo in a video kind of live. But what I wanted to do was I took a screenshot of every question that I'm going to ask. I wanted to just identify some of the components at play here. Okay, so that as you're watching it, you kind of understand, wow, it's really kind of very intelligent in terms of how it takes a question and then can translate that back to whatever your complex data structures are via map by WebFOCUS. The two key components of this offering are the large language model in the background that understands English. Like you'd be surprised some of the questions I start asking, and I'm not like prompting it for filter values via a field. I'm really wrapping my question with a lot of kind of words and phrases that are not important to returning the actual accurate answer, but represent how I would talk to people. And then what we added in between is prompt engineering. So that gives a lot of instructions to the model about the data. And that's things like, hey, which variables are categorical? Which ones are numerical? Because as we start asking questions that involve filters, it's actually incredibly impressive how the combination of prompt engineering and the large language model will identify the appropriate field to search for that filter value and return the answer. That was one of the things I was most impressed by as I went through testing 9.3.3. So you notice that's a simple question, right? Hey, what's the balance by age, So anything that's covered in blue, like that's a measure that it's returning. Anything that's red, that's an age. But again, I don't care about that. I'm just asking a question. That's one. Then I'm starting, there might be a customer like Charles Tesh, for example, or in this case, Armani Sanchez, that I might be interested in. So what's the transaction count for Armani Sanchez? How does it know that this person is a customer or the name field? Like I haven't said what is the transaction count for name Armani Sanchez. So this is where the large language model is very intelligent and says, that looks like a name. Do we see a field in the WebFOCUS metadata that looks like that's a name field? It is not searching through every dimension or every attribute in every value. It's actually very targeted and very smart about where it searches for that. Here's another one where we're introducing something like a calculation. Anything that WebFOCUS can do, you can do. And you'll notice we're even introducing the use of that predictive measure, which is predicted risk. So in this case, I'm wrapping this by like, what is the by, and it's returning average predicted risk by age. Here's another one that's similar. Again, you may be asking questions to answer questions that arise as part of your experience, or you may simply be exploring the data. So that's another one. Here's another one that's kind of similar, average predicted risk by age. This one starts to introduce multiple filter values, predicted risk by name for customers that are 54 years old with a balance greater than 100,000. Okay, so now we've got multiple filter values. I've said customers, but in this demo, the field name is actually name, so like it's not confused by that, all of this language that I'm introducing, or show me the. Um, this is similar. We're trying to zero in on customers that are most at risk, and we're also interested in what the balance is. And then this is the ultimate one that I'm trying to get at, like multiple measures, sorted kind of by the name, where we're looking at those customers that have a lot invested in the bank and that are at risk. That might be the journey, for someone going through a natural language query experience. So let me play a video and just kind of narrate it. And I think you'll get a feel for that experience. So, it's like we've just gone through our WebFOCUS portal. Now I got questions. How am I going to get the answers to those questions? Well, we think natural language query is a great way to do it. So your experience, I'm just going to kind of click through here a little bit, because this is actually going to be available out on social. So why am I getting a black screen? I don't know, but I'm just going to run the video again, and I'm sure everything will be fine. Okay, so let me just kind of click through this a little bit. It kind of takes you through really quickly that first question. What's the average predicted risk by age? I can look at it graphically. I might learn and understand some specific things. 34-year-old and 54-year-old customers seem to kind of have a slightly higher probability of risk. I'm going to skip through that part of the demo that I showed you live, which is looking at the portal. Okay, you can kind of see I'm going through that same demo I just took you through live. Now let's get into it, start asking questions. So you notice we get type ahead, like, do you want help? You can click in and you can see a list of all the fields that you have access to, or you can just start typing whatever you want. So it's going to handle your simple questions like balance by age. And you've got options to look at this a number of different ways, right? Line chart if you've got time series, bar chart, rank, vertically, horizontally. In this case, we're using the filter. We're looking at the transaction count that we saw was an important indicator of risk for a specific customer that we may have identified as at risk. Now we're introducing that. Let's look at the average transaction count, maybe by a higher level dimension. Remember, number of transactions was an important measure. I think I just mentioned that. Let's continue on. What else do I want to know about? How about the average predicted risk by age? We noticed that 54-year-olds, right, and 34-year-olds seem to have a higher probability. Maybe I want to drill down on that. You can kind of follow, you can use this kind of as a data discovery or an exploration exercise, or to answer questions that arise. Now we're looking at the predicted risk by customer, and we're zeroing in on just customers that are 54 years old. And let's also look at those with a balance greater than 100,000. And lastly, what I'm going to take you to is that kind of money query or question where it's the balance and predicted risk by name, balance greater than 100,000, predicted risk greater than 0.25. So that is kind of the context of how we believe natural language queries can be very valuable to existing WebFOCUS customers as a complement and an augmentation, not a replacement of their existing experience, and a lot of additional kind of great information on some of the technical details that back it up. At this point, what I want to do is I want to hand it over to Aiden, because I'm sure you're saying, "Or that's so amazing, all of it, but how do I create the model?" You're saying I can train a model and deploy the model in a no-code fashion and get that information into my existing content, but then also add in natural language query. What's the workflow for all this? We're going to take you through all of it from the beginning to the end. This is kind of cooking show, right? Where I showed you the end result to start, but now we're going to go back to the beginning. We're going to show you the ingredients.
Awesome. Thank you, Porter. And I see there's a question from Gregor here just about, will NLQ support other languages than English? At the moment, it's just for the English language, but certainly we're looking at expanding that for the moment in English, but we're aware that there's a lot of sort of use cases with many of our customers to embed this natural language piece into, something other than English. So we're absolutely aware of that and working towards making it available in other languages too. Okay, so Porter showed you sort of the end result of all three of the main data science offerings. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull back the covers a little bit and just show you start to finish how we got to what Porter was showing. Both, the NLQ piece, because I can show that super quick, ML functions, and then a little bit later we'll even do the instant insights and show you how you just immediately, build a canvas from that and have it all brush linked like Porter had it. You can see I'm in the hub here. I'm on 934. I'm just going to quickly show you how you add an NLQ container to a dashboard because it's super, super easy. If I go to the assemble visualizations page, all I'm going to need to do is select, give it a sec there. There we go. Perfect. Go to containers, select explore data, and drag that onto my canvas. And then I'm just going to select some data set. That's it. That's all I need to do to embed that natural language query piece into my dashboard. Porter had it on his own page, which I think is a great idea to sort of, here's your tab on, full screen. How are you examining your data? But it could be alongside other visualizations on the same page too, right? It's that simple. That's how I add NLQ to my dashboards once I've enabled ML functions and the data science services in general. Okay, so the main meat and potatoes of this is the ML function side. So again, that's the no-code training of predictive models that I can then build, my dashboards, my reports off of. I'm actually going to work in the same data set Porter was showing, so that bank customer churn data. And we're going to see how we go from just having this historical data set of in the past, which customers have churned, which ones haven't, all the way to, a new set of data that has a prediction appended that I can then start building a visualization off of. Now, maybe some of you have seen this flow before, but I am on 934. There's a bunch of new stuff to show. So if you have seen this before, hopefully I can still show you something new about this process. We're continually making new improvements, adding new use cases, adding new models. So there's a lot of exciting stuff going on there. The actual model flow workflow here is going, I'm just going to say flow 3 times here, but it's within the flow view of the reporting server. And maybe many of you are familiar with this. Hopefully, this is where, you can do a lot of statistical modeling, merge your data sets, statistical transformations, everything like that kind of happens within the data flow view. So this is sort of an extension of that. You can see it. Maybe this is the sort of the view you're familiar with. I'm within the data flow. This is my data set. Again, I'll quickly sample it just to show you same data, right? With customer ages, some, demographic information, and I'll go all the way to the end here. I want to show you education level, marital status, card category, everything like that. So once I've enabled DSML services, I have two additional tabs here. I have train models, and I apologize, it's probably a little bit small on your screen. I have a train models tab and a run models tab. So training models is, like it says on the tin, taking historical data to make my initial model. Or if I'm using an unsupervised algorithm, and again, we'll dive a little bit deeper into what that means, it may just be the data set I'm actually looking to make a prediction on. And then once I've trained that model, I'll be using the Run Models tab to set up a flow, as I get new customers in, to run that model against them and then append a risk prediction, right? Because right now I'm feeding it some historical data, so customers that have previously churned, and my end goal is a model that I can then run against new customers and get some kind of predicted risk score. So the way this works, when I do click on train models, and you can see everything's sort of annotated, we'll walk you through the steps here. So you don't need to have any data science experience to work with this at all. It's all Python under the hood, but we're not touching any of that. We're doing it all through, the WebFOCUS tools that you are all familiar with already. It's really just using that interface and using that existing power to enable you to do this. And again, if it's your first time messing around with a predictive model, there's great tutorials walking you through a bunch of examples, and the actual interface here is all annotated. But you can see at the top here it says select models based on the problem you are trying to address, right? So it's kind of unique in that way. I'm not picking a specific model. Maybe you've heard some like neural networks, right? I'm not picking a neural network. I'm picking the type of problem I want to answer, and that's all I really need to know to get started training something predictive, something awesome that I can then plug into my dashboard. So something like classification, right? Binary classification. This would be predicting different categorical variables. So there's, a bunch of different examples of what that could be. That could be, a patient with outcome A or B. In this case, it's binary, so we're looking for two possible outcomes. It could be, a machine that's labeled as needing maintenance or not. In our case, right, it's a customer that's at risk of churn or they're okay, and that might be a certain score threshold where, if they're over that threshold, they're at risk. Anything categorical would fall under the classification sort of model category here, or type of problem. And then beyond that, and this was a relatively recent addition that's really exciting because it does expand the power of what we can sort of, what problems we can tackle a lot, is multi-class classification. So again, if I'm looking to, label some product into 10 different categories, I can do that now. It doesn't need to be binary A or B. Again, our example is because we're just looking at churned or not churned. If I'm, looking to categorize my customers into 6 different categories, I can do that here, right? As long as those categories exist in the historical data I feed it, it'll automatically detect those and then build a model to assign customers to those multiple categories. And I will point out one thing as I'm highlighting over this, you can see popped out in purple, again, probably a little bit small, but under the hood, there's a bunch of statistical models running in parallel that the end result will then compare, pick the best one, and then give you just the best one on, that local performance. If I am, wanting to dive a little bit deeper, compare the models, I can absolutely do all of that, pick and choose. Maybe, I'm looking to restrict myself to a certain kind of simpler model so I can explain it better. I have the option to dig into each model's result and compare them. But if I'm not familiar with that and I just want to, pick which one's best, it'll automatically feed that to me. And I'll actually just start running it as I explain the rest of these categories. This is a, relatively small data set. I think it's about 10,000 lines. And this will take, I think, about a minute and a half to run here. Of course, this is just the initial training. Once I've trained it, running it against new data is very, very quick. But the models here are relatively lightweight. We're aware that so many WebFOCUS deployments involve millions and millions of rows of data. So it's built with that kind of scale in mind. So this interface, and I apologize, I just did that force of habit here, but this interface is what I get once I've selected the kind of problem I'm trying to solve. So my target, that's what I'm trying to predict. In this case, it's automatically detected all categorical variables in my data set that have one of two values. If it was multi-class classification, there'd be a whole bunch more options, but we picked specifically binary classification. You may ask, why is there a distinction? Well, binary classification models are much simpler, much more lightweight. So if we are doing a binary problem, it's best we pick these kind of models. So we can see, 70% of our historical data here is okay. 30%, and again, this is historical data, have previously churned. So we're going to pick that as our target. We can do some things like change the kind of scoring we want to use. If we're familiar with that, area under the curve is, a good general measure of our model's performance. But if I'm not familiar with that at all, I can just, leave it at the default and it will do an amazing job here. We can also ask, what kind of positive class. So what's our, one when we're predicting 0 and 1, which is our one. In this case, it's going to be the customers that have churned. And the only last step is, what do I want the model to consider when it makes this prediction? Right? So by default, everything's selected. So it's using all of our different columns to make that prediction. But if I don't want, if there's some sensitive data I don't want the model considering, or in this example right here, client number, that's literally an identifier. We don't want the model looking at that because we don't want to making any inferences based off of that number. It's just an identifier. There's no, relationship between what 785 and 786 are. So we're going to unselect that. We don't want a model considering it. And that's it. That's all we need to do for sort of the pre-processing step of this model training sequence. I will say you may wonder, what if I have something I'm not sure about including? It might not be important. All that happens in the training process under the hood. So if I hadn't deselected client number, it would realize that it doesn't have any predictive power, right, in making a decision on whether somebody's at risk or not. So it would filter it out. But if, I want to make sure it doesn't include it, this is how I would do that. Okay, I'm going to apply that and just get it started running. Perfect. So I've added it to my flow. I've pressed the play button to start running that, and it'll pop up here and start training. And while it's training, I wanted to just talk about the other kinds of problems you can address here. We covered binary classification, multi-class classification. The next most obvious one is regression, right? So that's for a numeric measure. What is the risk score of these customers? You also see that within classification. What is the expected output of this machine? Anything like that. What is the expected, time until this machine needs maintenance? What is the predicted value of this customer? Anything that's a numeric measure would fall under the regression category. And then there's 3 more actually on the left there that fall into more of the unsupervised algorithm category, which means I'm giving it data and I want it to make the predictions on that data. There is no separate historical data. There is no training set, right? The first one of that would be clustering. And again, I can sort of just hover over that so you see those options on the left once this is done training. Clustering is grouping my data points, whether they be, again, machines, customers, patients, warehouses, vehicles, whatever, grouping them into categories basically based off of latent characteristics that might not be obvious to the human eye, right? Might not be obvious to somebody just taking a look at that data. So something like that could be like white space analysis. What kind of marketing group do these customers belong to? What kind of maybe performance group do my different stores belong to? And I'm actually just giving it that data and it's finding those patterns automatically. So in the case of clustering, I'm just giving it the data I want it to make predictions on. And then before we take a look at this, 2 more really quick. Anomaly detection, pretty self-explanatory. I'm giving it my data and I want it to find anomalies in that data, whether they're, again, machines acting anomalously, customers acting anomalously. And the last one is time series, which will, again, run a bunch of different time series models under the hood that tackle different things like seasonality, trends over time, and will return, back to me some kind of time series forecasting. So this is what I'm presented with when I'm done training. Again, just jumping back to our current use case, which is customers churning at a bank. I'm given all the statistical models that ran under the hood. And you can see there's different scores. You can think of this sort of like precision. So, logistical regression was about 87% accurate. Something like gradient boosting, and I don't need to know what any of these names mean, is closer to 85% accurate. Because if I exit out of here, it's automatically selected, in this case, the logistic regression, because that had the best performance on our data set. So what I'm seeing here, and I'll make this full screen so it's a bit bigger. What I'm seeing here is the risk column is the actual label from our historical data we fed it. I will say when the model began training, by default, it reserves 20% of that data to not train off of and save to actually test the model once it's done training. So these would be from that remaining 20% that we haven't touched yet. So you can see something like this customer was at risk. Our model didn't label it correctly, labeled it as okay. This at risk, it got correct. You know, all these okay ones is getting correct. This one at risk got it correct, correct, wrong. In this case, correct. And we can see there's also a score here. So on the far right, I'll just direct your attention over there. You can see there's a threshold for where it begins labeling them as at risk. In this case, it's about a 0.6. So, right, this guy's 0.77, he's at risk. What's interesting though is I can dynamically adjust this based off of the kind of problem I'm trying to tackle. And I'm going to use a medical example here because it's the most obvious. So if this was, not customers at risk, but maybe of churn rather, but patients at risk of, some disease, maybe I want to be extra conservative and I'd rather label more people and get them wrong than miss somebody and label them as fine when they're actually at risk of this disease, right? So that's where this precision and recall come in. Recall is of all the at-risk patients, in this example, how many did we capture, right? So a high recall means we've captured the vast majority of those that were actually at risk. Precision is of the ones I've labeled at risk, how many were actually at risk. So if I'm doing outreach, maybe I don't have time to reach out to all these customers. I'd rather it favor precision. I'd rather it be more precise on who it's labeling as at risk. If I'm the opposite, again, in that medical scenario, I'd rather have a bunch of people wrong, but make sure I get everybody. I'd rather favor recall. And I'll hop over to, there's a bunch of different metrics here that again, I can safely ignore. But if I am wanting to, pull back the hood on this model a little bit more, understand it a bit better, I have all these different options to get into the nitty gritty of what the model's doing and what its performance looks like. I can actually dynamically adjust this. So again, if let's say this was a medical scenario and I'd really rather favor recall, I'd rather make sure I capture everybody. I can dynamically adjust this. This is adopted this. You can see here precision has taken a hit. It's gone down from, I think it was 90% to 85, but our recall has gone up to 80%. So we're capturing 80% of those that are actually at risk. I won't linger too much longer on here. Again, a bunch of different features. One more thing I'll show is the importances of individual columns. This is a great way to start explaining that model, get a better understanding of how it's making those predictions. In this case, it's telling us which columns were most important in making that prediction. So which columns were most important in determining whether somebody was at risk or not. And these are pretty self-explanatory. These are relative measures. So one is the most important, and then you can see 0.184, that's relative to the most important feature. The actual transaction counts, transaction amounts, those are, general indications of account activity and health. Makes sense that those are strong indicators of whether somebody's going to churn or not. Months inactive too, that's a big one. Recent contacts, if that's, outreach points, whatever, anything like that. And then there's some demographic information, income category, age, and then some more, information on how they're using their account. So that's, I'm going to just get off of full screen here. That's all I need to do to train a model. If we recall what we did, we went to train models. We determined what kind of problem we had. In this case, it was a binary classification problem. We picked what we wanted the model to consider. In this case, again, we just disabled the identifier for that customer. We clicked run. It automatically selected the best model, and now I have it here. Again, this is testing it off of our historical data. How do I now complete the last step, which is run it against new data so I can get, risk predictions on the rest of my customer base? And that's, a really simple process. All we need to do is we need to right click on this module, or I can click the save icon on the sort of middle right here, save that model. By default, again, it's picking the statistical model, the logistic regression that performed the best. So again, if I don't know what those are, if I don't want to compare them, it's selected the best for me. I don't need to worry about that. I'll give it a name here. I'll just call it May 21. I can give it a description, right? Because I can share this model amongst my team. This isn't something that's, restricted to my workspace. If, I have some data scientists or, more technical developers that are doing the training and a different group of people that are going to then build visualizations off of that trained model, totally easy to share. It's shared as a master file, actually, the model itself. So it's familiar to everybody working WebFOCUS. All right, I'm going to save it. I'm going to go back to my repository. I saved it in this app folder, and you can see your May 21, that's the model, and you see it's saved as a master file. I can't go build visualizations off of this because it's just a model, but it is sort of abstracted in that way. If I do now want to run it against new data, I've gotten another data set here that I'm going to open a flow on. This can also be done from within Designer. Um, if I'm just going to sample this real quick, you can see there is not a risk flag in this data set, right? This represents new customers where we don't know if they're at risk or not. And what I can do is I can click Run Models. Oh, I apologize. I grabbed the wrong data set here. Oopsie daisy. Let's do that again. Sample data. And I think there was a label in there, so my apologies. There we go. Perfect. This is the data set. There is no risk label here, but everything else is the same. They're new customers we want to run that model against. So when I click run models, you can see that May 21 appeared. When I was on that other data set, it wasn't appearing because it didn't match, the kind of columns that are expected. It doesn't have to be 100% match, but it needs to see some of the same columns for it to show up as an option to run this model against new data. So again, no risk label here. I want to append that with our pre-trained model. All I need to do is drag that onto the canvas. See it's attached to the SQL select here. And then in this case, I'll complete the flow just by writing it to a new target. I'm just going to click run. And if I just open up this data, there we go, right? We had our existing data that did not have a risk label, and the model has appended two new columns, one on whether they're at risk or not, and then a probability or a score for that risk. I've written it to a new master file, so if I go back here, this is just 01. Let's sample that data. I have a master file with those two new columns that I can immediately start building visualizations off of. The last point I want to make here is if you are familiar with data flows at all, all that existing power is available for this too. So if I want to, run this model against my due data every morning, I have all of that scheduling power, right? So if I want to set it on some kind of, daily schedule, have it send me an email once it's done running. If you're familiar with this at all that's available. Anything you've done with, in the past, combining data sets or tweaking some fields, that's available for model training as well. Okay, I think I've spent long enough just diving a little bit into the nitty-gritty of what that looks like. Minus the model training time, probably took us just a few minutes to configure what we wanted to train and then save that model, run it against a new data set, and that's all I need to do. Now I have a master file that I can build a dashboard like we saw with Porter's, with that sort of predictive power behind it. All right, and with that, I think I'll hand it back to Porter for a sec just to dive a little bit into what ML functions looks like on the designer side, and then we'll come back and take a look at instant insights.
Thanks, Eden. And there's, a couple questions you could take a look at. I was just furiously trying to answer one before the baton got handed back to me, but it was a good question that I think I'm going to bring up. Eric was asking, so like a lot of times when someone asks a question, there's like human quirks that are going to be involved here. Let's take the case of someone asking a question to return information for someone of a specific name. Let's say Aiden Ellesmere is the name, show me the balance for Aiden Ellesmere. So if your name is comprised of, let's just say, a single column in the data, and that column is name, what if, like, sometimes people would type in, like, they type in dates in different ways. There's European standards, there's American standards. Sometimes people just say, show me the balance for Ellesmere Aiden. You know what I mean? Like maybe type their last name first. So I don't know the answer to this, and we can certainly find out. Eric's curious, and I think everyone probably is how smart is the model? If I were to say the balance by Aiden, Ellesmere Aiden, I'm curious if it could, and I don't think you have the answer, but I'm just gonna
Yeah, well, I can give sort
the
of a
benefit.
general thought on the kind of principles that determined how we created this model. If you compare it to one of those general sort of language intelligence models that you might interact with online, it's much more limited in scope, right? What we're talking about here is limited to that business intelligence use case. And the trade-off there is number one, performance, right? It's going to be quick with your millions of rows of data or your larger data sets. But the other part is it understands that business intelligence querying context very well, right? So depends on a case by case basis. We try a name that's spelled backwards or a date that's done in a different format. But I would expect it to do very well in those cases simply because it's limited in that scope and it's been trained with that kind of query matching use case in mind, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And another thing I was just thinking is like I'd have more confidence that it would find it if it was like if there was a first name, last name field, and someone typed in Ellesmere 8, and then it's probably breaking those into two different words and probably scanning both of those. So great question. I think one that I'm curious to ask our top engineer, Marcus, as well. And Eric, maybe we can reach out to you with a specific answer on that. It's obviously important as well. All right. Well, I'm just going to keep us rolling here. This is a great session. Appreciate you hanging with us. We're excited to show it to you. What I want to do is now say, all right, we have trained that model and we've saved the model. It's available to me. There's two different ways that you can take advantage of it. You could actually find that model. Looks like I've timed out here. Let me refresh my screen. You could, I'm going to actually close that screen. Let's just log back in from scratch. There's two different ways you could leverage the results of that model. So a lot of times people may take a look at that and let's say that that is the scored bank data transactions. So a lot of times you might want to take that, you might want to actually just like load a new source of data with that calculation. You can use data flow mode to do that. If you just want that data set with the scored data updated for you. Okay. So you could take it, do that ahead of time. And then all of your report developers, application developers, business analysts, business users, it's just available to them. But I think what's great is that people can also do this for themselves within the WebFOCUS designer. So as I select that data set, or this data set is going to actually be my current bank data. It doesn't have the scored data in it, but it is a current list of all of our customers. But what we don't understand is what is the probability of risk of these customers. You'll notice it's all kind of the same dimensions and measures that we've got right here. So one of the cool things we added to the designer a couple of years ago is the data tab. So really everything that you could do from a data flow mode, you can now do right from the workflow of designer. So I've got my current bank data. I could take a look at what that data looks like. You'll notice the run models option. This is where I can actually deploy the model. So it's actually going to look for any models that are a match for my current data set, right? It wants to know that it can match the input variables that were necessary to train that model to my current data set. And I actually found three that are a match. And all I do is I drag that onto the select columns. Now, once I click back on select columns, it scores that data just that fast. Okay, let me kind of move this up a little bit. Let's look into this. So it is telling us, whether it's predicting that customer will churn or not, and then it is giving us a probability. I'm going to sort that. So of course we could start looking through this list of customers. The other thing that is, really great that we added over a year ago to this is, we're looking at all of these predictions. How did the model arrive at that prediction? It can be a total black box, and I think that that can deteriorate the confidence that people have in those predictions. So something that's important when you're doing this is called explainability. I can click on any of these and I get a visual depiction of the most important variables as regards to identifying this customer as at risk. This one I think is a 75% chance of risk. The width of the bar is the amount of importance that it has. And then the color is the number of this value for this customer, did we find that to be abnormally high or low? So we're saying their balance is abnormally low. Their credit utilization is abnormally low. Actually, the last quarter balance change is abnormally high. Okay, and so obviously, as we went through the model, Aiden trained the model, you're looking at feature importances. That was kind of at the highest level, right? these were the most important variables at predicting churn. What's cool about explainability is it goes down to that atomic level, right? Because different variables could be more important at identifying a customer as being at risk. And I'll show you a second one to kind of prove that case. The other thing is it shows you, these are the top 3 variables that were identified. This is why. It was, in this case, the actual value is 7,000, but the realistic range is much, much higher. Okay. So you could actually type in a modified value, some what if analysis, and see what impact, because some of these things you might be able to change. Some of the variables the organization may have some control over, in this case, we're not going to have control over the balance, but you can see if this balance was just the average value and we recomputed it, would actually take that customer from 75% probability down to 17%. And so I can close this and I can just show you another one here just to kind of show you how that it can really change dramatically. In this case, it's card category and transactions, and transaction amounts. So that's one of the cool things that we've got built in to this. I keep clicking on the wrong X there and it's scolding me. Now, once I've done that, simple as that, all I did was drop the model onto the canvas. And when I go back to visualization, what I'm going to get is I'm going to get 2 additional measures that I've got access to. And that's going to be predicted probability, and I think it's like a risk predicted yes or no. So now this is where we can do data discovery. We can actually we can add it to our existing content. So if I look at risk predicted probability, let's turn this on for our entire data set. And then I can start looking at this by education. Okay, and I can do everything that I can do in WebFOCUS. Like, do I want to kind of look at the total? Do I want to look at the average? I'm going to look at the average. So I'm noticing that, kind of like high school aged customers are 23.88% on average. I can start looking through this. I could look at it by marital status instead. And I'm noticing single people have the highest average probability. I can look at it by income category. Okay, I'm looking like low income, right? So this is just a typical data kind of discovery exercise, but everything that we can do in WebFOCUS, you can now do with that scored data and that predicted probability that we went from, historical data to training to saving to, I call this deploying, or running the model. And so kind of like the cooking show example, right? Like this might be one of my visualizations. Let's go to one of those pages that I built. That first dashboard, customer churn analysis. I'm just going to go into edit mode. It's kind of like the cooking show. Well, we've got one of our chart widgets, and then maybe I did some sorcery to turn that bar chart into what I call a bar gauge. Cool technique that I'd be happy to share with anyone if they want to email me, or maybe I'll include that as part of a future session. But all right, so now we've got 4 charts. And I added in a report, that's got the risk, added in 4 filters. So that's my page. Then all we have to do is go to our portal designer and go to content. Oh, that one was left open for too long as well. Let's see if I can get in there. There we go. All right, so now I go into pages, customer churn analysis 2. Now it's already in there, right? But all that I do is just drag it into my portal designer. And that's how we go from historical data to including that in something like, a full-blown dashboard report application as well. So sticking with the designer theme, so we can see how within the designer, I can kind of like score the data and then do whatever I might want to be doing, data discovery, exploration, or actually building that into existing content. There's also something that can generate insights and visualizations and important findings for us automatically. And that's called Instant Insights. It's right there. And don't get me wrong, I love my Instant Insights demo, but Aiden is really our data science guru, and I like to have him kind of describe some of the different algorithms at play. So we're going to have him now do a live demo of the Instant Insights and actually take you through what kind of how you might install some of these DSML services, as well as the available educational offerings.
And thanks, Porter. I know we're already sort of creeping up on our time, so I'll pick up the pace a little bit here. I want to leave room for Hannah's piece at the end here on sort of a new program on making this installation process easier than ever. Um, Let me just share my screen. I'm going to talk quickly about Instant Insights, and then we'll hop into the installation piece. So if you recall on Porter's initial demo, there was that one page where he was looking through those automatically generated insights that showed, which age category and which income category and which education category had the most at-risk customers. It also had a little time series component at the bottom. That was all generated using this tool. And if you're really looking for a first step, you don't know a predictive model that you want to train, you're not there yet, but you want to make your dashboards, AI powered. I know it's a bit of a buzzword, but, give it some predictive modeling under the hood. This is the path of least resistance. This is the easiest way to automatically sort of generate predictive insights on your data without having a specific question in mind. There's lots of different use cases for this. It could be used by, somebody that wants to just explore the data working in Designer. But I think the best use case for it is to then embed those visualizations into a broader dashboard like we saw with Porter. So I'm in Designer here. I'm off of a different churn data set. I'm just going to build something super quick because I do want to show you the combined visualization as well. So, we're working on some kinds of visualizations. Let's color it too. Perfect. I'll have option to an additional button here within Designer called Insights. When I click on that, it'll start running in the background. It doesn't pause my Designer, so if it takes a little bit longer, I can continue working and then it'll sort of give me a notification when it's done generating those insights. But it should be pretty quick on this data set. You can see it's generated that here. It does a good job of telling you in plain English what the visualization is generated is actually, displaying what it's describing. And it also does a good job of splitting up the kind of categories of visualizations that you will see. In this case, relatively small data set, relatively simple data set. So, none of the visualizations are going to be super, super complex. But that's just, again, because of this small sort of demo data set. And there is some really cool information on, especially the time series side. So we can see, there's an inactivity fee on these accounts. It's saying the vast majority of our customers don't have that. In this case, again, they're buying different products. This is showing us that distribution. Remember, this was all automatically generated. I didn't tell it what I was looking for. This is just examining the data, finding correlations, outliers, anything like that within it. If I go to pairs of columns, that's going to be that correlation things. You can see there's a plain English description of each of these visualizations. So there's a strong positive correlation between recent debit transactions and recent withdrawal count, right? Sure, that makes sense. If they're a more active account, they're going to be doing more of both. And this is giving me that visualization, sort of describing that correlation. There's a whole bunch of them generated here. You see some of medium strength, some that are just weak. These are the chi-square tests that you saw from Porter's visualizations, where it's showing us, in this case, overdraft protection. The ones with overdraft protection are less likely to be at risk of churn. Makes sense. And what's really cool here is time series too, right? So this is an older data set. I think it goes 2017 to 2022 or 2023. But this is showing us the time series trend of direct deposit counts, right? So that's one measure of account activity where people are putting, money into their bank. We can see there was a outlier, purple dot here, where there was all of a sudden a big dip in direct deposits, and it coincides with basically the start of COVID-19. So that makes sense. People weren't, depositing money into their bank accounts. You see there's a little spike, maybe sort of as some of that COVID stimulus came in, and then activity plummeted sort of over COVID for this bank specifically. Maybe they didn't do a good job of, transitioning to online, anything like that. But we can see there's a pretty clear trend of a dip during COVID that we've now mostly recovered from, but we're not still back at that peak from 2019. It can get even more complicated than that, right? It can be something like a trend line as well. So this is withdrawal amounts. You see there was actually a spike in withdrawals, again, probably due to COVID stimulus or anything like that. Sort of mid 2020. See the orange line here is indicating a trend. We sort of peaked out in activity around the start of COVID, a little bit before the start of COVID. And we've actually been dipping slowly since then in account activity in this case specifically withdrawal activity. Since then, you can also see here, and again, I apologize, it's probably going to be small. It says a seasonality with a period of 12 months has been detected. So not only has it found this general trend across all of our data, it's also found that in this case, near the end of the year, there's an increase in activity, right? So 12 months would be that yearly trend, and it has, 6 or 7 years to determine that trend off of. So it's actually telling us that in English as well. Last one I want to show you is just another indication of what that looks like. This is debit transactions. You can see a big dip in COVID. And again, it's highlighting those outliers in purple, the trend line in orange, and then the actual data itself in blue. There's some more complex things if I'm looking to actually, look at the properties of the data itself. But again, keeping up the pace, I just want to show you how we get to what Porter showed, which is a dashboard built from these visualizations. Now, his was purely from Instant Insights. You can combine them with visualizations you already built. That's why I just quickly made this basic bar chart already. If I want to add that to a canvas, all I got to do is click those three dots there and copy that to the canvas. We'll use sample data in this case, and I can start building a dashboard off of these Instant Insights. Right, so we'll also grab maybe one of these correlations, and let's grab a couple time series data points as well. Let's grab this and this. So you see, I'm just copying this all to my canvas. They're visualizations like any other. I can add that to my dashboard alongside traditionally built visualizations, or I can make an entire sort of page out of them like Porter did. And last thing I want to show is, we're looking at it here. It's all brush linked. So if I was to say, select this product type that the majority of our customers belong to, sorry, I'm going to left click on that and press keep. It's going to update all these other visualizations to only be that category, right? So you can see this one on the bottom's changed. This one certainly changed. This correlation has changed. This is just looking at that second product. So that's the gist of it. Porter's was touched up and color coded and everything, but that's basically it. I've gone into Designer. I've told it, tell me something cool about my data, time series wise, correlation wise, outlier wise, and then it's just as easy as dragging that onto the canvas to add these AI powered insights to your existing dashboards. Okay, perfect. And then again, just sort of keeping up the pace, I wanted the last sort of subject here is the installation. We had a question earlier, does this come with 9.3 out of the box? The answer is no. And the main reason for that is, you really want to have DSML running on separate resources, separate computational resources, but it is way easier to install than it was previously. Back when we first released this, it was limited just to specific deployment of Linux. We've expanded that now. It's available on Red Hat, it's available on Windows, and it's super, super easy to install. It's really just a matter of running some binaries to set up the services. And then on the WebFOCUS side, it's just a matter of changing a single line in your configuration file. And I'll show that real quick. Let's go. I'm just in the admin console here, server workspaces, configurations. On my edit serve, edit. You can see within the workspace section here, there's a PyServe URL. And this is just linking to the machine that I've set up the SML functions on. That's the only thing I need to change on the WebFOCUS side. It's not inhibiting or obstructing any of its other functions. And once I've done that, all these different pieces of functionality, the insights button, the train and test models buttons, the NLQ container, they all just appear. As soon as it's enabled, they'll all appear. And again, the installation process is easier than ever to get started with the DSML services. And with that, I'll hand it over to Hannah, again, just going a little bit quicker at the end here to talk about sort of our program with making that installation, again, as easy as possible.
And Aiden, before we do that, does it make sense for the two of us to quickly look at the questions that are available and see if we can get a quick answer?
Yeah, let's do that.
I'll take a stab at one. So one is about what type of user is required to use Instant Insight basic user versus advanced. I believe that anyone that has a WebFocus designer license has access to Instant Insights, but I think we can go ahead and confirm that. We've definitely had kind of like licensing changes and simplifications. So anyone that is just on one of our newer SKUs, you just get access
Yeah.
to everything.
Yeah, yeah. The only point I'll add to that is if there is like performance concerns, you don't want everybody designer using that, you can disable each part of this individually. So if I just want the NLQ piece, I just want the, data training. There also may be a way to segregate that based off user roles. But certainly, if I'm not interested in providing instant insights to my whole group of developers, I have the option to just pick and choose what I want to enable.
Yeah. Cool. There's a question about the visualization for the estimated seasonal
Mhm.
component.
Yeah, so there is, and you might have seen that at the very end there when I think it broke the visualizer. Here, I'll just quickly reshare. Super quick. Um, when I selected just the second product, I don't think there was enough data, so it broke it here. But you can see seasonality was highlighted in blue. The problem is because I just don't have it full screen on that initial visualization here. You right here, you don't see it just because it's very small. But yes, there is a separate trend line too for that seasonality, the overall trend, outliers, etc. So that's all sort of segregated out, and you can color code that each individually. And then the last question was providing data to AI, causing security issues. That's a big one. I think that we should definitely address, and that's the matter of fact here is that everything is happening locally on the Python server you've set up the SML services for. So we're not sending it to some model offline or online rather. That's then going to send back some output. This is all within your environment. And there's trade-offs to that. Number one means you need to install it yourself. You need to give it the resources to train these models, right? So it needs the memory to be able to perform this. But it doesn't leave your environment, right? It's just going back and forth between the machine you set DSML services on and your WebFocus reporting server. So from a security perspective, nothing is being sent out to the internet or to some model that's hosted somewhere else. It's all within your environment.
Great. And let's hand it right over to Hannah to make sure we get all this information in before the end. And then, of course, if you have more questions, feel free to keep typing away.
Thank you so much, Porter and Aiden. That was an awesome presentation. Go ahead and share my screen. Just a couple of notes for you guys. Yeah, so I wanted to make sure that I just quickly go over the new program that we've launched as of today. So you guys are the first ones to hear about it. But we're super excited to launch our WebFocus AI Bootcamp. You get all the benefits listed out here whenever you take advantage of the new AI features in WebFocus with NLQ and machine learning functions, everything that Aiden and Porter outlined, plus more. So we're excited to be able to offer that to you all in a kind of program format to get you guys jump started on the tool. So to expedite that journey for you, we're actually going to be offering like an expert one-on-one session where we sit down with you virtually and we go over really what your specific objectives are with using AI and WebFocus to make sure that we're pointing you in the right direction in terms of which models to use and that sort of thing. We're going to provide some real-world examples for you all to get practical insight to start that journey. And then you will also get access to a quick start course. This is to cover the ins and outs of installation that Aiden mentioned, and this will be something that you'll be able to take on your own and guide yourself through. And of course, you'll have access to our team of WebFocus AI experts to really get insight on that if you have any questions along the way. And of course, you'll get that immediate business impact that we really highlighted through those demos that Porter and Aiden did, where you can see the real world business examples of AI being extremely beneficial in WebFocus for you and your organization. So to register, you just need to drop a registration form fill out at the link I'm going to share in the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We're super excited to offer this. It's our first boot camp that we're offering here at IBI.
Well, it appears Hannah has frozen, and so no worries. Usually these things kind of resolve themselves, and I think she'll kind of be back in a moment. Either that, or she's doing like her best ventriloquism
So
impersonation.
I'll just reinforce Hannah's point here. If you have tried DSML service in the past and got frustrated by the Ubuntu requirement or the steps to install it, it's the best time ever to retry that. We've made it so much easier. It's available on Windows, it's available on Red Hat, and of course, we set up this program to walk you through each step individually. So again, if you tried in the past and sort of were put off, it's a great time to take another look at that. We've made it so much better than, the very initial beta release.
And since we did lose Hannah, guys, I will include that link in the follow-up email, so you guys will have access to that. All right. Do we have any additional questions for Aiden or Porter at this point? We do have a few minutes left if you guys have any last minute questions you'd like to ask.
Eden, one that came from Doug is asking about, kind of the app folder and the DSML services. And his question is, does it require the local Python?
I don't see that question, but I
Yeah,
can.
it's not in the Q&A. It's actually in the webinar chat area.
Okay, okay. Right. Yeah, so the Python that powers DSML services, doesn't interact directly with your WebFocus deployment, right? What happens is there's a web service call that goes back and forth between that machine that's running DSML services and your WebFocus environment. So you're saying based on the app folder name, does any of this require the local Python? Yeah. So the local Python is totally separate from this. So if you have a local Python set up, for example, for the Python adapter, where you can run scripts on your WebFocus deployment, that's totally separate.
That's what I thought.
Mhm.
I think we're good. I'm just looking through the webinar chat to make sure we didn't miss anything. It looks good.
No, and I'll just reiterate Sergio's question, which was on the chat as well. He asked if, is there a separate license for this? Just to reiterate, this is not a separate license. This is included by default. The only thing you need to do is, configure an environment to run it and then make that change to the configuration file. There's no separate licensing to be able to use this.
And I will also reiterate, yes, I will share the recording and all any material that the presenters can share with you guys will be sent to you in a follow-up email. All right. Anything else? Any last minute questions?
Of course, if something pops up later, we're all available. Happy from one of our previous webinars, I've had customers reach out, ask me a couple questions. We set up a call, we dive into this. More than happy to do that with any of you. So we're all available to answer your questions if you, review this recording later and have something additional you want to send us.
Yeah, thank you, Aiden. All right. Well, thank you, Aiden. Thank you, Porter. Appreciate everything that you guys showed today. And Hannah, even though you disappeared, thank you for sharing the program. We will include the program link and all your information with all the follow-up stuff too. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our May virtual user group. We will see you next month in June. And as Aiden said, if you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week.